Hello, I am Professor Kino, and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be continuing the series of my top 10 favorite films. Coming in at number 9 is... After dropping out of high school and finding work in a movie store, Quentin Tarantino, today considered to be one of this generation's most influential filmmakers, began to become acquainted with cinema and its craft. After assisting some film productions as an actor, screenwriter, and, in one short 1987 film, director during his late teens and early 20s, his career finally took off when his first feature film, Reservoir Dogs, was released in theaters on October 8, 1992. Premise: a group of thieves, codenamed Mr. White, Mr. Pink, Mr. Orange, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Blue, hired by a mob boss named Joe Cabot and his son Eddie, try to uncover a mole in their midst after a diamond heist goes south. Writing: this is a very interesting film because it is a crime thriller/heist movie that never shows the heist that the film revolves around. Instead, the film focuses on the characters, the criminals, and their relationships with each other. More importantly, it is a film that focuses on the feelings of panic and distrust, feelings that are bolstered by the film's non-chronological story. As the film unfolds and more of the characters' stories and past are revealed, it soon becomes clear that the thieves know very little about each other, and so the levels of trust between them is, understandably, very low. And this feeling of distrust is captured beautifully in the film's writing, and then projected into the minds of its audience. What Tarantino knows how to do best is craft extremely realistic dialogue. For instance, all of the characters in Reservoir Dogs are introduced in an excellent first scene at a diner that takes place right before the heist. Everyone is talking to each other as if they were all good friends, and the conversation between them feels extremely natural. And through this, what each character is saying reveals their personality to the audience without feeling like heavy-handed exposition. Mr. White is shown to be very classy.
You shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize.
Mr. Pink, through an extremely entertaining argument about tipping, is shown to be very selfish.
Come on, throw in a buck.
I don't tip.
You don't tip?
No, I don't believe in it.
Mr. Blonde, very relaxed, but also very defensive of honor.
Hey, Joe. Want me to shoot this guy? Shit.
Mr. Brown, very immature.
Dick, 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 dick.
Mr. Blue, very attentive.
How many dicks is that?
A lot.
Mr. Orange, very reserved.
Toby. 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 Toby Wong. Toby Wong. Toby Wong. Toby Chung. Fucking Charlie Chan.
Joe, very authoritative.
I'll take care of the check. You guys can get the tip.
And Eddie, just like a younger version of his father.
All right, everybody cough up some green for the little lady.
But despite finding out all of this in one scene of moderate length, the characterization never feels forced. Instead, each character is introduced via an interesting conversation that feels like it could be one overheard at any diner in real life. The audience is not told what each of the characters are like directly. It is all discovered through their word choices and interactions. This helps make all the characters feel like real people. And, because the first scene does a fantastic job at setting up the characters, the rest of the film can then focus on the distrust between them and the panic that happens after an unexpected catastrophe. Skipping right over the heist, Reservoir Dogs' second scene jumps right into insanity. Mr. Orange is shot in the gut, Mr. White is trying to calm him down, and Mr. Pink is shouting about one of the crew being a mole. The choice to jump straight from before the heist to its aftermath effectively makes the audience feel the characters' surprise, panic, confusion, and disorientation.
I don't know who did what. I don't know who's got the loot. I don't know if anybody's got the loot. I don't know who's dead. I don't know who's alive. I don't know who's caught. I don't know who's not.
The film does not need to teach the audience anymore about the characters, because by keeping the audience in the dark, Tarantino is effectively making them one of the crew. As the film progresses, it is soon revealed that most of the characters only know each other's codenames and a little bit of each other's personality through the interactions that they had with each other right before the heist. As the film continues to unfold, each character reveals various events of the heist from their perspective, and the film shows the audience snippets of each character's backstory. Through this, the audience can start to piece together the film's events in much the same way the characters are able to. Because of this format, the audience not knowing exactly what went down during the heist, the arguments between the characters, and the slow revelation to the audience about the details of each character, all combined with very realistic dialogue and storytelling, Tarantino is able to craft a consistently intense, character-driven, whodunit crime thriller. If there is any flaw in the writing, it is just that the mole is suddenly revealed to the audience about 2/3 of the way through the film, and I think that is a little too early. But other than that, the writing is great, the dialogue is great, and the chronology sets the mood of the film perfectly and helps to create an intensity throughout the film by placing the audience in the same slightly confused and disoriented position as the characters themselves. Acting. Harvey Keitel plays Mr. White, and he is very good in this role. Despite the audience knowing that he is a criminal, he is very likable, compassionate, kind, and relatable. Keitel plays Mr. White as a good man with solid traditional morals who just fell into the crime business. Under all of this, though, Keitel is able to showcase Mr. White's strong commitment to his profession and loyalty to his superiors. Steve Buscemi plays Mr. Pink, and he does a great job in this film. Buscemi plays up Mr. Pink's selfishness perfectly by being consistently irritating through complaints and a clear lack of compassion toward his companions. You instantly want to hate him, but also can't help seeing his points. He makes sense in his survival instinct, but it is so obviously driven by self-preservation above all else that it makes him seem slimy and untrustworthy. He is the opposite of Mr. White, and so their morals clash quite a lot, and Buscemi and Keitel play off each other marvelously. Also, and I mean this entirely respectfully, Buscemi's facial hair and his build make him look very rat-like, and that just helps his Mr. Pink, a character who, just like a rat, would flee a sinking ship if it meant his survival. Michael Madsen is probably the standout here as Mr. Blonde. Behind his relaxed nature is revealed to be a sinister and psychotic intent. Madsen plays everything cool, but also shows off an arrogance and cold-heartedness that is quite scary. He is confident and has his own set of values and morals that clash with Mr. White's more traditional ones. In fact, there is a great scene in the film where Mr. Blonde tortures someone that particularly shows off Madsen's skill as this character. He is sinister and brutal, but has an even more terrifying glee behind his eyes that can send a shiver down your spine. Tim Roth plays Mr. Orange, and while he spends most of the film screaming from his gutshot wound or passed out, when he does talk, he is shown to be cool and calculating. He plays a badass who also has a compassionate and softer side. Consequently, him and Mr. White get along quite well, and after he is shot, Roth is able to showcase a terror in Mr. Orange's eyes that will make you feel sympathy for him immediately. Lawrence Tierney plays Joe Cabot, and I find him fine in the film. He is just another large, bald, or at least mostly bald, old mob boss. Compared to other mob bosses like Vito Corleone in The Godfather, or even Marcellus Wallace in Tarantino's sophomore effort, Joe is merely suitable. He does play the cliché of a mob boss well, and while that is perfectly fine for the film, it is all that Tierney really brings to this performance. Chris Penn plays Eddie, and he gives the character a mixture of authority and immaturity. He shows that he has learned a lot from his mob boss father, but also that he still has a long way to go before he reaches his full potential. I personally find Penn's delivery a little forced at times, but this might only be because he is overshadowed by Keitel, Madsen, and Buscemi in most of the scenes that he is in. And finally, Tarantino placed himself in his own movie by playing the role of Mr. Brown. There is not really much to say here since it is more of a cameo than anything else. While he is not the best actor in the world, he is perfectly fine here, and he does not detract from the film when he is on screen. Costumes, hair, and makeup. The costumes of the main characters are not very surprising. Most of the criminals just wear black suits, but this similarity does a good job at putting all the potential suspects on the same playing field with each other, so that none of their looks give away their true natures. The only criminals who are not dressed like this are Joe and Eddie, the former of which is dressed up in just a different type of suit, and the latter of which is dressed up in a very, very 90s blue coat instead of a black suit jacket like everybody else. This does a good job at showing his younger personality when compared to his father. And then, when it comes to makeup, the blood used is very realistic looking. Unlike Tarantino's later films where the blood is very thick and explosive, in this film it is the opposite. It looks very real. Set design. The film pretty much takes place in one set, an abandoned warehouse that the criminals used as a rendezvous point, and while not too flashy, it does a fine job of making the characters stand out and places all of the focus on them, as it should be in a film like this. Because Reservoir Dogs is so heavily driven by performances and actors, the set being very bare helps to keep the audience focused on the acting itself instead of what's around it. Choreography. There is not much to talk about here, as the only bursts of action are one chase scene, one torture scene, and a few gunshots. There is no real motion in this action, but it is all helmed very well, and each moment of action has some very good shots and angles that help to drive the feeling of intensity forward. Cinematography. While there is nothing really jaw-dropping here, the cinematography is pretty good. The conversations are set up very well. For instance, the first conversation in the diner feels very crowded, like you were at the table with each of the characters. And there are also some definite standout takes here, including some very cool character introductions, namely Mr. Blonde's, and a few other standout shots that I have noticed eventually became some trademarks for Tarantino, such as the opening a trunk shot when the camera is on the inside. Editing. This is handled very well, especially since the film is non-chronological, and, in addition to this, There is also one scene that has two events playing out simultaneously. So the fact that everything is edited in such a way that the story is comprehensible is great. In addition to this, conversation-wise, a lot of the scenes are handled in long takes without many edits, but then this is juxtaposed by the action, which implements comparatively more edits. This makes the action more jarring and helps to push forward the sudden intensity that action scenes should. Since there is no CGI, we will skip over that category and move to the next one, music. There is not really a score for this film, but there are a handful of licensed songs. All of them are sourced, and many of them feature introductions by the made-up radio host K. Billy and his station K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s.
That was the Partridge Family's Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted, followed by Edison Lighthouse's Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes, as K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s weekend just keeps on trucking.
This is unique to the film and helps to push forward the idea that the characters of the film are real people. They listen to a realistic radio host as he plays music that most everyone who lived in the 1970s would know. In the end, this does a great job at juxtaposing the intensity of the film and the brutal things that happen in it by playing catchy, well-known songs alongside them. It helps make the film feel more realistic, and during some of the more intense scenes, makes them feel even more intense.
Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck.
Directing. For his freshman effort, and with a measly budget of between $1.2 and $1.5 million, Tarantino was able to craft an excellent film that is simultaneously a crime thriller, a character study, and a whodunit film. Everything here meshes well, and it does a great job at keeping the film feeling uniformly intense and engaging throughout. While not Tarantino's most influential film of all time, it does definitely stand out and even more fantastic when considering it is only his first time behind the camera for a feature-length film. My enjoyment. I love this film, and it is probably my favorite Tarantino film. While I know a lot of people love Pulp Fiction, I find Reservoir Dogs more consistent in tone and style throughout its runtime. It is definitely one of Tarantino's most small-scale films, but I think that elevates it because the whole thing is focused solely on Tarantino's dialogue and characters, which has always been his film's most compelling aspects. Because of this, I find Reservoir Dogs a compelling crime thriller from beginning to end every single time I watch it. Recommendations. I recommend this film to anyone who is a fan of Tarantino, a fan of crime dramas, or a fan of character studies. However, if you are not a fan of realistic-looking blood, swearing, or the use of derogatory words and phrases, then you may want to look the other way. While the film is great at making its characters believable, not all of them are upstanding citizens, so they curse and some of them can be low-key racist at times. That being said, it is a great crime film, a great Tarantino film, and a great film to watch in order to see where Tarantino's career began. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I will be continuing this series of my top 10 favorite films in my next video. Until then, I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.